I hope that you are seated comfortably, with the light turned down and the curtains drawn.
Somebody there?
Hello, this is Tony Anderson, and welcome to Ecto Portal. I'm here with my co-host, Verna Wilson.
Hi, nice to meet all of you out here, and we're ready.
All right, so this being our first show, we're going to have a few human error probably, but that's okay. We'll learn as we go. We're going to cover a variety of topics on the show. Obviously paranormal, occult, otherly.
Some of it will delve into the mystical side of things, and some of it might delve into other topics that are somewhat paranormal, UFOs, and that side of the paranormal. Even though I don't consider all of it paranormal, but we'll get into that another time.
We'll do Bigfoot. We'll do aliens, abductions, cryptozoids, Montauk, you name it, we'll cover it eventually, I'm sure. But tonight's topic, of course, is going to be mediums and sensitives. But before we get into that, we're going to first introduce ourselves and give you a little bit of information about who we are and what we do and our background in the paranormal and how it relates to this show. Maybe what we each personally want to bring to Ecto Portal, which is why we kind of came up with the name. It's kind of vague, but yet it still leans towards the occult and paranormal and can be open for many, many things, obviously being a portal.
It comes from the word ectoplasma,
Yep.
which was the spirit energy that was basically the energy that was seen and felt in the seances back in the spiritualist, the 19th century spiritualist seances. And it was known as sometimes a hoax to a lot of people, but also, anyway, that's what it means. It's the spirit energy from.
Just move it a little closer to the mic.
Anyway, that is what it means. It means spirit energy.
In fact, a lot of in the spiritualist movement of the late 1800s, early 1900s, ectoplasm was often emitted by mediums and psychics. But we'll get into that first. Would you like to go first, or would you like me to go first as far as discussing who we are and what we do?
Why don't you go ahead and go into your background, and then I'll go into mine.
All right. Like I said, I'm Tony Anderson. I'm the host of Ecto Portal. I am a paranormal investigator on my off time, not my real day job. But on my off time, didn't really start until about 2009, I would say. Got into it basically out of curiosity. I mean, I had a few experiences when I was younger that obviously I thought, oh, this paranormal, this supernatural stuff, I wonder what this is about. I actually took a parapsychology class when I was in community college. And yes, a parapsychology class where you actually receive college credit. I know, it's amazing, isn't it? They're pretty rare and far and few between. So if you ever see one and you're interested, take it. It may not be there long. So 2009, I joined a local paranormal group just to see what it was like to go on investigations, just to kind of see how things worked. Now, obviously, the TV shows had been around already. Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures, and a few other popular cable TV shows about ghost hunting were on the air. So, of course, I watched a little of that, and based on my own experience, I thought, let's give it a shot. Let's see what we got. So I joined this local paranormal group here in San Francisco, and I've been with them on and off since 2009, so 6-7 years now, I guess. And I go off road ghost hunting on my own with my other partner in crime, Jackie Klebe, who hopefully she'll call in for us tonight. We go all over the place. I mean, asylums, prisons. There's nothing we won't investigate or any place except for places with asbestos or rotting floors or no floors, that kind of thing. We do have our limits as far as safety goes. So I got into the paranormal. I'm big into EVP, electronic voice phenomena, which is audio. I record audio for paranormal means. That's what I focus on. That's what I've always focused on. And to me personally, that's the most hard evidence you're probably ever going to get. Photographs are great. They can be faked, but audio could be faked as well. And I work pretty hard at it. I've gotten pretty good at it. So I've developed an ear for it, and you do have to develop an ear for it over time because people start out, they're real gung-ho, and they want to be an investigator. They want to do audio recording. They want to ghost hunt. They have no idea how. They're excited. They realize the reality of it is you're sitting in the dark for hours.
It takes a lot of patience.
And you may walk out with nothing. So a lot of people will go on one or two and go, wow, this is not what it appears like on TV. On TV, it's great. They get evidence every 10 minutes. There's a commercial. They come back. It's great. In reality, it's not like that. Because most of those TV shows, which I've dealt with in the past, helping and finding locations for, they shoot for 2-3 days. They investigate for 3 days to bring you 35 minutes of amazing evidence. So they're there for the week. But on TV, it looks amazingly short and constrained. So there's a different world between TV paranormal and real life paranormal. So with that, so I did a lot of audio recording, and I've gotten really good at that. And I've done a lot of presentations with this local group, lecturing. Haven't written a book yet, but there's still probably one in my head up here bouncing around. I just haven't really come up with the right topic. So yeah, that's pretty much how I got into it. And I'm endorsing on Alcatraz. So a lot of people think, ooh, Alcatraz, it's haunted. Well, I mean, I work there so often, it doesn't seem haunted to me. But I think anybody who works anywhere on a regular basis, unless you're really looking for it, you're probably not going to find anything. And there's a lot of myths, and a lot of TV shows create myths, and then they recycle myths about Alcatraz. So if you ask me if Alcatraz is haunted, I say, well, I hear stories from other people. I have a few stories of my own on an overnight investigation there, so I'll tell that at a later time. But take it away, Verna. Tell us who you are, how you got into this, how long, etc.
Gosh, it goes back quite a ways, so I'm going to go ahead and go back to the beginning, and then I'm going to try to trace everything from there and see how far I go here. It all started, me being a medium all my life started when I was 4 years old. I was actually dying of pneumonia, and I had I had a near-death experience. And oftentimes people ask me what was that near-death experience? What happened? So I'm going to recall it as I remember it, ingrained in my head since I was 4 years old. I was just a little kid, just laying down, just sleeping and just dying, and I felt myself slowly sinking, just slowly sinking.
Do you have fever?
I had a very high, horrible fever.
Wow.
I was just sinking, and I was getting unconscious, and just everything was fading before my eyes, and just the whole room was swirling and fading. And I felt myself going into a deep sleep. And when I went into a deep sleep, I recalled that I was walking somewhere, and it was so peaceful. It was like such a heavy peace that you don't really feel while you're here. I mean, it's like that peace beyond understanding that people describe. And there was like so much light and clouds around me. And I know it seems cliche to call it clouds, but that's what it looked like to me. It looked like either clouds or mist, but it was like all this light coming from it. And I remember being a child, and I remember just looking around, standing going, wow, this place is nice. I feel familiar here. I like it here. And I'm just walking around, I'm looking, and I keep walking. And then all of a sudden, there's a barrier. And there's these tall, tall beings. They're in white. And they're staring at me. And one of them, I remember, had very long, dark hair. He had the most vivid, what I could describe as blue eyes, looking down at me. And he had the most kind look on his face. And they all stopped me, and they said, "You're not supposed to go this far." And I said, "But I like it here. You know, I'm only 4 years old. That's, you know." And they said, "No, you're not supposed to go this far." They said, "You're going to be going back." And I said, "But I don't want to go back." And they said, "Well, you have to go back. They said, you have a lot to do." And I kept telling them, "Please don't send me back, please. You know, I'm just this little kid begging." So they're telling me, "You have to go back, and when you go back, there are going to be people who aren't going to understand you. There are going to be people who..." They told me this. There are going to be people who aren't going to like you. They're not going to understand you. And things are not going to be easy because you're going to be tempted to do a lot of things that everybody else does because you want to be liked. But we know you're going to resist all of that, and you're going to eventually find your path and your way. And that's why you're needed there. They said, "So we know you can do it, and we're sending you back." And I remember those words, "We know you can do it." So they went ahead and they sent me back, and I just remember me waking up, and there's a priest sitting there, and he's smiling, and he's talking to me, and he's making me laugh, and yeah, he was making me laugh, and he goes, "Hi, Verna," and he's like making faces and smiling at me, and I'm smiling and laughing back at him. You know, I'm only a little kid.
Right.
And then all of a sudden my fever breaks, and he put his hands on me. Well, actually, he put his hands on me first. Then my fever broke, and he turned around to my mother. He said, "Your daughter's healed. She's not sick anymore." And I was well. And what happened after that was that I was well, and you know how when you're sick, you're very extra sensitive? Well, I was extra sensitive.
The lines are kind of blurred, I think.
Right, and you're extra sensitive when you're sick. Anybody who's been extremely sick understands that extra sensitive phase you go through where everything is much more contrasted and everything is more vivid in detail. You see and you hear things that you don't normally hear when you're in perfect health.
Right.
Right. Well, anyway, I started seeing and hearing things that most people weren't hearing. And, of course, I was a little kid and I didn't understand. You know, I just got over being sick. The only difference with me is that it didn't go away. I kept seeing and hearing it, kept seeing and hearing it.
Wow, so it stuck with you.
It stuck with me, yeah. So, anyway, it started being like that all my life, and then I was a little kid, and I would see and hear things other little kids didn't, and other people, you know, I got teased about it, I got mocked about it, and before long, the only people I told it to were my family, who understood me, but sometimes my mother would get a little weirded out and say, "Oh my God, is my daughter..." You know, I don't want my daughter to have this, because her family actually inherited this gift, and she didn't want me to have it. Because,
wow.
Yeah, because her mother
Did she
had
ever
it.
mention it before that, or she just wanted to see if you had it or if it developed?
She wanted to see how it developed. She would say to, like, take for example, when I was at a neighbor's house once, and we were at this party, and I heard the neighbor say out loud, "Oh, so-and-so is here. I don't want that person here." And I overheard it, and I turned around, I said, "Why don't you want him there?" And she turned around, she goes, "What?" I said, "Why don't you want that person there?" And I would point. And she said, "I didn't say that." I goes, "Yes, you did. I just heard you." And my mother turned around, and my mother would say, "Verna, that's not very nice." And I would be like, "Well, but she said it." And I was just a little kid, you know, what am I supposed to say?
Yeah, there's no difference for you yet.
There was no difference yet.
Yeah, it's information.
Right. So my mother would be like, "Don't say those things in front. That's not nice. You know, you're ruining the guesses. You're ruining the party and the neighbors. You know, And I turned around and I said, well, I'm sorry, I thought she didn't want him here, you know.
Right.
So anyway, that was an example, but it happened, and it didn't make me very popular, and, you know, little girl with a big mouth. So, but anyway, my mother, you know, checked to see how it was developing, and then later on, when I was in my teens, my mother would say, baby, I'm afraid you inherited the family gift. My mother had it, and she used to scare us all. And I would be like, really?
Wow.
And I mean, I was a teen by that time, and I would be like, wow, this is kind of cool.
Did your grandmother have it at all?
Yes, my grandmother was able to tell the future, and she had prophetic dreams.
Wow.
And I had prophetic dreams when I was a kid, and every one of those prophetic dreams came true.
Wow.
So anytime I had a prophetic dream, my family took it seriously. My sister and my mother, they would be like, okay, we're watching out. Okay, we're taking this seriously. And one of these days, I'm going to tell some of the stories my mother told me about her grandmother having prophetic dreams, and they found some things, and
Wow.
some things happened as a result of it. I'll tell that another
You became
time.
Verna Damas.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
That's
So
pretty
she
wild.
told me that, and then when I was a teen, I was like, wow, this is cool, but it still wasn't easy. It was kind of scary
Yeah.
at times. So anyway, teenhood, you know, got through that, got through, you know, it just became a part of me, and, you know, got through the teasing, and, you know, I would date guys. You know, when you were a teen, you're starting to date, and some guys were weirded out by it. Some guys were like, oh, this is really cool. You know, my girlfriend's a medium. You know, wow. You know, yeah. I mean, and people would come up and they would randomly ask me for readings, and I didn't know boundaries back then. And I would give it to them. They would be like, wow, and then they would have their friends come run and ask me for readings, and all the kids wanted readings, and I would be like, I'm not going to give readings to everybody.
Yeah.
You know. So anyway, and they would be like, she's a weirdo anyway.
Did you learn to keep it on
You
the
know?
down low except for when you wanted to use it? Like, you knew people might know kind of what you do, but then you thought, you know what? I don't really want to give readings for these people, so I'm going to kind of downplay it a little bit. And then when you want to do it, on the flip side, do you upplay it to people who you trust, who you do want to use it for? Do you know what I mean?
Well, I was a teenager back then, and
You just took it as it came?
I took it as it came. I didn't learn the boundaries yet.
Right.
You know, and so, you know, teenagers people can be cruel. You know, I had a lot of really great friends when I was a teenager who understood me, but the ones who didn't they would get mad when I wouldn't give a reading, and they would be like, she's probably just a weirdo, you know, or whatever. And you know, kids can be cruel, and then the ones who really did like me would be like, wow, this is great. I'm going to tell more of my friends. And I found it was you know, people would just come up and they would mention that, but you know. After a while, I got into other things, and, you know, your life gets transient, and you get into other stuff, and you put it in the back of your mind. So let's go ahead and fast forward to my 20s. In my 20s, I was involved in the music. I was involved in the music world. I did a punk magazine, and I also was involved in a music group. Didn't think about any of that stuff. Didn't talk about it. Only a few close friends knew about this, and then. I actually got into involved in the Wiccan pagan community. I was introduced to that by
Whole new crowd with that.
a whole new crowd. I was introduced to that by somebody who was part of who was a druid, and he was part of a small druid circle in the Bay Area. I don't know the name of them, but he was part of them, and he was part
they
of
still
a local.
around?
You know, I don't know if they're still. I think they may be still around. And he was also part of a local pagan community that practiced what they call the fairy tradition. But he walked up to me himself, and he said, you know, I think you're meant for this, and I think I'd like to train you. And do you want to be, he just asked me right off the bat, do you want to be trained in this? And I was just like, well, you know, I have to learn about it first. I don't know what you're talking about. And then as soon as he told me, I said, yeah, I want to learn that. So I know, it just came natural. So he started training me, and then I started getting involved in groups in the pagan and metaphysical community, and in the Wiccan community. And among my small circle of friends, I started giving readings then, and then some of them were working as, some of these circle of friends were working as tarot card readers, and they were giving readings with tarot cards, with crystals, with whatever oracles they were using, because this was part of learning what we call the craft. It's known as witchcraft, but it's actually the craft.
Like the Fairuza Balk movie?
Like the which movie?
Fairuza Balk movie, The Craft, about the witches. Wiccans?
Yeah, something like that, yeah. And except that that every tradition is different and not everybody learns it the same way. So they were giving readings, and then I would come in and hang out at the store where they were working at and hang out with them. And then anytime one of the readings was sick or absent, the owner of one of the stores, the name of the store was Gifts of the Goddess, would run up to me and say, "Verna, you're here. Do you want to give a reading? Can you give readings to people?" I would say, "Sure." So I would bring my own cards and give readings, and everybody knew me. And it was just a small community. And I never thought to bring it out in public. And then later, I was introduced to Tommy Netspan, who runs a local paranormal group in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I went on a couple of investigations with him. He invited my sister, who was already working with him, and then he invited me, and the investigations were successful. I got to know him, and actually I want to take the time to thank him now for getting me involved in the paranormal investigation side of it. And so he asked me to do a lecture on the mediumship, and I thought, well, let's bring it out of the shadows and into the public, because I felt all those years I had something to talk about. So
you were at our last conference too, when we did Sutter Creek, Ghosts of Sutter Creek. We did last February.
Right.
This last February we did in Sutter Creek.
At that conference, I actually did a reading. I actually did some stuff with my sister. My sister, who's also very clairvoyant and who's been seeing ghosts all her life. She's going to come on the show one day, and she's going to talk about her experiences, which are pretty intense.
Oh, she'll come on more than once.
Oh, she'll come on definitely more than once. And she has definitely that gift, and spirits love my sister. They've followed her since she was a kid, and she used to point to me and say, "Look at that person standing there," and we were the only two who would see it, and she spotted it first a lot of the time. And anyway, Linda will be here to talk about all of that. But we did at Sutter Creek, we actually did a lecture about clearing and grounding yourself and putting the boundaries, those boundaries that you talked about. And that was very successful, and I think a lot of people learned a lot of things that they were supposed to be learning. It's good to learn if you're going to a lot of these places. Investigating, yeah, because you want to protect yourself, because you're in a very heavy atmosphere where there's a big past, there's a lot of history, and and if you're sensitive and if you're working with a lot of equipment, you don't want to get yourself in some kind of mess where you're
taking someone home.
Right, you're taking someone home. You got
who's maybe not everyone can see.
Absolutely.
And we've obviously have friends who have done that.
Right, we do.
That have attachments, or have had attachments for no other reason than maybe they didn't realize they went home with them, and they realized it later. I think everybody I know has had an experience with one, or knows someone very close who's one. The longer you investigate in this field, the more open and the more receptive you are to some of the things in it.
Absolutely. And even before I started investigating with the group, I experienced people who were picking up on spirits and picking up on stuff, and they were taking it home with them, or they would take it to wherever they were. And I actually came up to a few people and say, "Do you realize?" And they would be like, "What is that? Are you crazy?" And I would be like, "No, I'm not." And then when they did something about it, they were like, "Oh my God, I didn't realize." And so I was talking with Linda about that before we went to Sutter Creek, and I said, "Linda, a lot of these people at this conference are going to be beginners, and it's very good that they learn this now, because it's going to help them." And we told Tommy, and I think we told you, and you guys said, "Great idea." So. And then before that, I think I lectured at the Oddfellows
That's right.
about the mediumship.
That's right. We did an event here as well for the Oddfellows.
Right. I talked about mediumship and how it would help your investigations. And it was actually a lecture that I made called Part 1. And Part 1 is where I talk about building up the mediumship from the inside, which means meditating and following your dreams so that you know what's going on inside of you, and you're building up all of your gifts and your centers, which is something I'll be talking about later. Everybody who's built up some kind of intuition and mediumship within them is intuitive, and the more you build up your gifts, the more you're going to be successful in your investigations, because you're going to be able to sense these things more
And you'll actually start using them even though you don't realize it.
Right.
It's funny how you start to develop some of these abilities as you investigate. And at first you think, oh, I have a recorder, I have a camera, I have an EMF detector, maybe a thermometer, and you're thinking, this is all I have. And as you go, you start to hear things, feel things, sense things, and then you don't. Before you know it, you're using a lot more tools than you brought with you.
Right. You're using the tools within yourself: clairsentience, clairaudience, clairvoyance, and there's I think I named them all. And there's also, and then some people, more than most people inherit one of those gifts. The most. I mean, you have them all within you, but most people inherit them the most. And then there are people who inherit all four of them and have all four of them happen at once. So I teach people about that, because before you do the tools, which I'm going to actually do a lecture called Part 2, where you get to the tools, the spirit boards, the crystal balls, the old seance tools, and then the new tools, the equipment that the investigators use. But it all comes from the inside first.
I think other good equipment is not really finding and detecting. The equipment's more documenting.
Right.
I think the equipment is just a documentation of what you may have felt, heard, seen, touched, sensed. I think it's a good way to back up a little bit as much as you can. It's kind of a paranormal keepsake, because otherwise you have nothing. So if you can capture anything with your equipment after you sense all these things, that you have both working for you, I think. And it validates all your hauntings and your investigations.
Right. And I tell people, don't rely on the equipment. Rely on yourself. The equipment is just a tool. And as Anthony said, it's there to document. But the best person is to rely on yourself, because back in the old days, the spiritualists, they didn't have equipment. They relied on their inner abilities and their inner selves to detect things. And then they had some tools that they use, like crystals, and they had spirit boards, they had tarot, but it was they mainly practiced by bringing out their own gifts. And I highly recommend that now to anybody.
So you consider yourself a medium or sensitive, correct?
Yeah, both.
Okay.
I consider myself both.
We have a caller now, Verna.
We do.
Who's
calling in?
Let's find out. Hello, Ecto Portal. Who's on the air? Hello? Is anybody? Oh, it looks like they hang up.
Oh, that's too bad. We'll call back.
Sorry, we're getting new at this, but yeah, you can call back. I mean, you can't listen to the feed live. We're having problems tonight, but you can definitely call in and still be on the show. So, Jackie, if you want to call in, 628-444-3202. Okay, again, 628-444-3202 if you want to be on the air. And you do, right? Of course, everybody does. Right?
Yeah, of course they do. We'd love to hear your experiences, and we'd love to speak with you and get some suggestions.
Okay, so now we were talking about mediums.
Talking about mediums and sensitives, and we were going to expand on the topic, and we were going to basically talk different things about it and tell everybody what it's really like to actually...
What's your overall opinion of mediums? I mean, have you always been respectful of mediums? Have you ever been skeptical of mediums? I mean, what's your personal take on mediums in general?
Yeah, we would love to hear that.
What's yours?
What's mine?
Yeah, Verna, what's yours?
Mine? My actual personal take on mediums is that I've always been very respectful, because, to tell you the truth, if it's somebody that's been growing up that way and that's had that all their lives, and they basically work with it a lot, it can be scary. It can be very draining if you work with it all the time. So a lot of that's a misconception with a lot of people. They always think that if you're a medium, you're tuned in 24 hours a day, and you're not. And sometimes that's the scary part, is that you're not. And when something comes in random and you're sensing something or you're hearing something, and the rest of the public or somebody doesn't understand,
Right.
and they look at you like you're a nutcase, it can be very it can be very isolating, actually.
I have something I had as a kid, not so much as an adult, but when I was a kid, up until my probably 20s. And I always thought it was strange, but I identified it and I actually learned to respect and use it. And I guess there's a name for it. I'm not sure what the word is, but it's when something is going to happen, something dangerous, an accident, a fall, something bad is going to happen to me physically, I actually could smell and taste a metallic taste. But it wasn't something you could smell if you were standing next to me. It wasn't something you could taste probably personally, but I could taste and smell this metallic taste. And I used to have this sensation just before I would trip and fall and hurt myself, before I would slam my hand in a door, drop something on myself, just get in an accident in general. I would always get this taste and this smell internally. And I realized after a while, whenever I get this smell and taste, look at my surroundings. Am I going to fall on something? Is something going to hit me? Am I going to be, in some kind of dangerous situation? So as I grew up, I learned to use this to avoid a dangerous situation. And I've done that, where I've smelled it, tasted it, and I've seen something diverted where it didn't hurt me because of it. And this went through my 20s, and after my 20s, it sort of faded. I've had it come and go as an adult, but very briefly and not nearly the same way. I don't know if I no longer know how to use it, or if it's something that I just didn't need to use anymore. Maybe when I was younger, it was kind of a warning thing saying, hey, something's going to happen to you, buddy. Watch where you're walking. And maybe now I don't need it as much. So that used to happen to me as a kid. And I also had a near-death experience when I was like probably a year and a half old.
Oh, I'd like to hear that.
We were boating on a river.
Yeah.
And we were on the deck. It was a nice day going down the river. I'm, a really tiny toddler, but, the side of the boat is high enough where if I'm not careful, I'm going to fall in. So I'm like looking and I'm trying to crawl up on there. Everyone's kind of watching me and talking, having visiting.
Curious kid.
Next thing you know, I climbed up on the edge of the boat and toppled over. Oh, we have a caller. Should we take our caller?
Yep.
Hello, Ecto
Yes.
Portal. Who do we have on the air?
This is Terry.
Terry!
Hey, Terry, what's up?
Hey.
Terry, so glad
Hey,
you
Verna.
called. That's
Sorry,
Hercules
my
in the
dog is
back.
barking.
Yep. I hear a dog.
That's Hercules.
All right. Is Hercules a medium
going
or
on,
sensitive? You still there?
Terry, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Is Hercules a medium or a sensitive?
Well, I'd say more the dog is insensitive. He doesn't shut up when I tell him to.
Oh.
I've been
Verna
around
knows
that
how he
dog,
is.
and that dog actually is very sensitive. He can sense a lot of things, and he barks at anything. He barks at some things that most people don't even see.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. So what's
So
your
what have you guys been talking about?
mediums and sensitives? What's your take on mediums and sensitives? Do you 100% believe in mediums? Are you kind of skeptical? Are you somewhere in between?
Oh, no, I'm an absolute believer. In fact, it took me many years to understand the difference between the two, and I came to realize that I'm more of a sensitive than anything. While I don't see a lot of things around me, like spirits, only once in a while I catch glimpses. I know when they're in the room with me.
Okay. Is it just something? Do you feel it? Like I was telling Verna just a second ago, I had a thing when I was a kid where I could smell and taste something metallic before I was going to get into an accident, fall down, hurt myself. So that was something internal. Do you have anything like that?
It's always when something is near me, and I use something as a generalized term because it depends. When I'm near something, I get a feeling in the center of my chest, and it's either, it kind of goes back to a fight or flight response. I either feel panic or I either feel peace. And if I usually feel panic, I know it's usually not good.
Oh, okay. So does it get heavier?
It gets heavier.
Okay.
And it's like an overall, my whole body, I can feel height, weight, where it is in the room. I don't necessarily hear it or see it. I just know it.
Mm-hmm.
Intuitively, I know it.
Yeah, I've
And
had that
I've
when I was
been-
investigating before as well, where I walked into a room and my chest kept getting heavier and heavier, like something was kind of pressing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But it wasn't one place. It was sort of a mass on my chest.
Yes, I feel it everywhere.
Wow. So you get
Yeah,
full
and
on.
I've
Like,
been, yeah, full on.
Wow.
I've been in situations when my father was alive. He was a minister,
mm-hmm,
and he was a full gospel Pentecostal minister,
mm-hmm.
and people would come in from time to time to church, and you knew when someone came into the sanctuary before the sermon was given that someone was not happy.
Right.
And there were particular instances when a family member had passed away and the grief had become so much. It's like Verna always says to me, be careful and keep your thoughts high because you don't want to draw a lot of low energy to yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I can understand
And in those
that.
cases, a lot of low energy was at play. And in the particular denomination I come from, we are strict believers in demonic activity.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times that demonic activity, the influence will come in and take over the person's psyche. Their behavior changes.
Right.
Their demeanor changes. They get dark circles under their eyes. All the stuff you see in horror movies.
Terry, you mentioned that you actually witnessed a demonic possession at your church. Can you recall that story?
Well, there was a woman, her mother had passed away, and this is a Southern family I'm talking about, and no one has quite the market on the family dynamic as a Southern family. They're known for their hospitality, but they're also known for their strong family ties. And this woman's mother had passed, and she had been going, after they had buried her and the service was over and all that stuff, she was going to the graveyard every day and just uncontrollably weeping and grieving. And I don't personally think the woman was capable of getting a handle on her grief. She wasn't, which of course, who in life is prepared? You know, loss is not something we're never really prepared for.
Right.
But this woman just did not have the tools to get through it. She had forgotten everything that she adhered to in the Christian faith, and her grief had just taken over. Well, she claims to have heard a voice say that if you serve me, you won't suffer this grief anymore. And when she finally attached to it, you know, the Eastern religion speaks a lot about attachment to the finality or the outcome of a situation rather than...
Oops, still there?
Oops, are you still there, Terry?
Oh, I think we
the
lost
line
Terry
dropped.
there.
Yeah. Terry, if you can call back, this is, we'd love to hear the rest of the story and maybe tell a few more experiences. I know you have a ton of them.
All right. Yeah, that was just getting interesting.
Yeah.
But I understand what she's meaning about, like, if you choose this and serve me, you don't have to go through the grief. But I think you need to experience the grief. Grief is a part of death and a part of life. It's both intertwined together, and I think escaping it, it's not going to be great in the end. I think you're going to want to do that. All right. If anybody else wanted to give us a call, Jackie, if you want to call in.
Yeah, I believe that Jackie was supposed to be calling in, and
Okay.
We welcome anybody else calling in. But, you know, to expand on what you were talking about with grief, grief plays, I mean, everybody needs to experience grief, and grief is actually what I call the price of experiencing loving somebody. When you love someone, you lose them, it takes everything out of you, but it also leaves you very vulnerable.
Yeah.
And not just emotionally, but spiritually. And you tend to attract situations in your life where you normally wouldn't, where you wouldn't actually let it in, or you wouldn't actually get involved so much.
Right.
Yeah. And and unfortunately, this woman experienced it in the saddest form possible. From what Terry was telling me.
That's when you're grieving, you're going to be like you said, the most vulnerable, and you're
Right.
low key. And a lot of people have that. I know a few people who had that when they were unemployed. They got really, really depressed.
Yeah.
And that's when they had the most problems. And if you turn to ghost hunting when you're unemployed and depressed, it's not always a great thing.
No. Mm-mm.
You got to have some strong energy when you do this kind of stuff, and know what's good and what's bad, and what your level is as far as intensity and what you can handle.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember at the Oddfellows conference when I was doing the lecture, and you were helping me with that exercise?
Right, with the chimes?
With the chimes,
Yeah.
yes. And and it was an exercise for everybody to get some sort of idea on how to make contact with spirit. And one of the things that I mentioned in that exercise before everybody started was, if you're feeling depressed, a little low, you're not feeling in the best of spirits, don't do this. Because you're just going to play, you're vulnerable, you're going to play tricks on your mind, you'll probably let in something that you don't really want to experience. So, of course, people came to the conference and they all seemed in good spirits, but you never know what's
Right.
going on inside of somebody.
Yep.
And so I quite agree, it doesn't go together.
Well, there were some people at the conference who some wanted to be there, and the person they brought with them had absolutely zero interest.
Yeah.
And they were skeptical, and some of them actually, discovered a few things or thought differently at the conference. So that was interesting that they did that.
Yeah, it's and I find that sometimes the people who come to the conference and they have absolutely no interest, or they've never done this before, bring a fresh perspective.
Right.
But you have to be focused and feeling pretty good about things. If you're depressed or you're feeling emotionally vulnerable, it's probably not a good idea.
Well, it's like they say, never ghost hunt if you're sick, because your immune system and everything about you is all low. And it's, if you're going to bring someone home as an attachment, you're probably going to do it when you're sick or not feeling well or really, really overly tired. So that's something to definitely watch out for.
Yes, definitely. And I recommend for anybody who's doing it on their own. Some people would like to investigate on their own because they're getting interested in this before they do it with a group. Make sure that you're feeling focused, you're feeling emotionally, you're feeling okay, you're not, that something's not going on in your life where you're going to be prone to get involved in things you don't care about. You know what I mean? Attract things at a vulnerable time in your life.
Right,
and
right.
And also just be mentally prepared. And anyway, we got a call.
Oh, okay. Let's see if it's Terry again.
I think it might be Terry.
Connected.
Hello, Ecto Portal. Terry, is that you?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Hello.
You can continue the story.
We actually got
What
a
part did I
break.
lose you
I've got
guys
a
at?
station identification coming up here in about a minute. But if you want to start a little bit, then hang on through that, then we could come back and finish that up.
Sure.
Very
Where did
cool.
you guys hear me last? At what point?
The person who had the choice of going through the grief or serving the other.
Well, she chose to serve the other, and I guess she was so desperate for relief in her grief that she gave over to the low energy or whatever entity was there, and it resulted in an exorcism that I witnessed in my dad's sanctuary, the church. Well, this woman, like I said before, she was very distraught with grief. And, in life, when you get to these situations that are overwhelming, you tend to draw, if you don't handle them properly, you tend to draw in a lot of negative and otherwise hostile energy, which is what she did.
Uh-huh.
And it resulted in a prayer group getting her sequestered on the floor of the sanctuary of the church that my dad pastored. And they were, because the faith I was raised in believes in the laying on of hands for healing and prayer.
Right, right.
And a group of about, I would say, about a dozen women had their hands on her praying for her, and she began to levitate off the floor.
Wow.
That must have been something to
And
see.
during this moment when she began to raise up off the floor, my mother had gone to the back door of the sanctuary to go get my dad. And he just so happened to meet her at the door. And this was I'd say a good 15, 20 feet away from where all this was taking place.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom quietly said to my dad, you need to come take care of the situation. We think this woman is possessed. And she's given herself over something that's not of this world.
Right.
And my dad, however, gently scoffed at my mother and said, oh, come on, she's just depressed. And about that time, the woman raised up out of this group of women and looked directly over at my father and said, oh, yeah? And I saw her head come up out of the group of women, because you got to think, she probably had a good 500 or 600 pounds of pressure holding her down on the floor. I mean, these women had her legs and her arms and her shoulders.
So her strength was like heightened too?
Her strength was heightened because I saw their bodies start to give way under the pressure of her rising up off the floor.
Wow.
Wow.
And she went back down on the floor, and they, in the Pentecostal faith, they rebuked the devil, as it were, and they began to rebuke the devil through prayer, and this big swelling came up under her neck, under her chin. And
Wow.
it eventually, she succumbed to the exorcism, and she puked up this huge glob of black plasm. And
Wow.
I was the church janitor, and I had to clean it out of the carpet.
Oh, I bet it smelled.
Oh, you're
But
like lucky
the
me.
smell, what was really odd about all this, I mean, I had seen this before through my growing up, but the odor,
Mm-hmm. What is
the
it?
odor that emanated from this carrying on was just unlike anything you'd ever smelt in your life. It was foul, is the word I would use.
What would you say is the closest thing you can think of that might smell like that?
Something rotted,
Okay.
something rotten, like a dead animal on a roadside somewhere. It was compounded tenfold.
Wow.
You magnify that about 10 times, and you can begin to, because not only did that affect your senses,
Uh-huh.
you sort of like your fight or flight sense realized that something bad is in the room and you need to go.
Yep.
Sounds horrible.
It affected your whole body. But the sad thing about this is that she was blaming this situation on everything other than what was actually transpiring. She was not blaming her inability to handle the grief. She blamed it on an E.T. doll that her son had. She blamed it on this, and she blamed it on that, rather than seeing clearly that she had a psychological issue that needed addressing. She invited all this other host of negative activity into her life, and it wreaked havoc on her daughter. There were things that happened to her daughter. Entities were coming into her bedroom at night and shaking the bed.
Wow.
Wow.
She began to have trouble in her marriage, and like I said,
That
her
must have been some
personality
household.
was severely altered.
Had quite the
So-
effect on her.
Quite the effect.
So what about
But
you?
it's
What
like
about?
Verna,
Oh, sorry. Go
go
ahead.
ahead. It's like Verna always says, always keep your mind high and draw what's good to you, because if you give yourself over to circumstance, you're surely going to draw a lot of low energy to you.
Yep. And I found out with any kind of paranormal situation where you have some kind of potentially challenging entity or spirit or force, that you almost have to be very grounded and true to yourself in order to get through any of it. Above
Yes.
all, you have to be true to who you are.
Well, it's like my dad told the woman later. He told me and my mom this in confidence. He said, I went to her and I counseled her and said, look, I spend a lot of time behind the pulpit teaching you guys about the Word of God and the tools that are provided there to help you get through life. My dad was more of a teacher than a minister, I think, but that kind of goes hand in hand, that title. But my dad was a good teacher. He's very patient with people, but he said, something happens and you forget everything you've learned. That's not the way to approach any problem in life, no matter what it is.
Yep, that makes sense, though.
So my dad counseled her as best he could, but then her daughter started having problems, and my dad had to go over to their house, and there had to be a prayer blessing on the house, because the house had to be cleaned, in a sense, to dispel all the negative energy.
Oh, I can imagine the energy that house had.
Oh, yeah, because she was drawing it in.
Yeah.
Once she gave over to it, it just, like I said, wreaked havoc on all aspects of her life.
I was going to say, it almost sounds like it's a parallel with like a drug addict, with a drug sort of. Because you get used to it being there, you get used to the feeling of it, and I guess you're always looking for it, but you want it to go away, but it's there, but you're looking for it. You know what I mean?
Yes, it's a psychological dependency on it.
Yep.
Because we want immediate answers. We want things solved now. And there's even a story in the Bible where people came to Jesus as he was coming through a town, and there was a girl that was possessed of a demon. And they said, Master, can you come and help us with this? And Jesus said to them immediately, he said, this is a situation that requires prayer and fasting. This is a situation that requires preparations. There's circumstances that are involving this possession that require attention. And my dad said the same thing. He said, she should have come to me when she was having a problem, and we could have helped her through it. Instead, she spent her time at the graveyard grieving and crying instead of getting herself the help that she needed.
The direction, exactly.
The direction, yes. Something to bolster her psyche, because she really was in a bad way. And I felt sorry for her, but look at all the mess that she created as a result.
Yeah.
How is she today? Is she okay today?
Did you hear what happened afterwards?
She recovered. The family recovered. The children recovered. Their lives saw balance again. And she learned she paid a price for a hard lesson, let's just say.
Yeah.
But, that's not something you ever forget when you witness something like that. You're in the same room with it. It just changes you. And you realize that there are forces at work in this world that are not seen with the naked eye. It's undeniable.
Okay, Terry, we're going to have to go ahead and take another call, but thanks for calling in and sharing that with us.
All right.
That was wonderful. Please call back, because I know you have other stories, and maybe you can tell some of the stories that we experienced when we were roommates together. We had a lot of experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of things happen. All right. Well, thanks for your time, guys. Good luck with everything.
Thanks, Terry. Have a good night.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, thanks, Terry, for calling in there, sharing a little bit of that with us. Pretty heavy material. Definitely leading off of mediumship, and I know mediums have a hard time fighting off some of that stuff too, like when they sense a lot of spirits and energies around them. They want to be careful not to get consumed by them, and have to take them over or not. But
Right.
have you ever had that where you've been almost consumed by something, where it scared you?
Yes, I have. I've had, I remember, actually I told you about this once, where I had, we got a call. I'll tell you.
Call.
I'll hold that
To
thought.
be continued, Verna.
Yes.
Hi,
Hi, Ecto Portal. Who's this speaking?
this is Sharon Leon.
Hi, Sharon.
Sharon Leon,
Hey,
glad you called.
International renowned ghost hunter,
Famous
spirit photographer.
famous paranormal
Artist.
investigator with her sister Anne Leong.
We could go
Now
on
listen
and
to
on.
you guys. You're going to make my head grow 10 times the
It
size.
deserves to be
Hey,
swelled.
listen, I really, I'm tuning in. Maybe it's just my computer, but is this going to be archived, this show?
Yeah, actually, our live feed is having trouble tonight, but I guess we're recording them all, so they'll be available probably in a day or so on the actual site. But ordinarily, you can actually listen live, but just because of tonight, we had some problems with our in the station here.
Gotcha. Well, I have a question I'm going to throw out to both of you.
Okay.
have you ever heard of the ability, and this is related to, I guess, mediumship and sensitives, which is your topic tonight. Clarifaction. Have you heard or do you know much about clarifaction?
No, I have not heard
No.
that. Have you?
Well, clairvoyant is someone who can see into the future, and you have clear audio, people could hear. I think that I'm developing an ability to smell.
Oh, right, the sense to smell. I mean, clairsentient is where you sense, and then
You have clarifaction, which is the sense of
clarifaction,
smell.
right, is where you smell.
Right. And as you know, maybe you don't know, but I quit smoking about 2 years ago, and ever since I stopped smoking, my sense of smell has gotten so much better. I mean, 200% better. And I found that just in the last couple of months, if I were to see, like on television or a photo of a puppy dog, now I love puppy dogs, who doesn't, right?
Right.
Just by looking at the photo, I could smell the dog. I could smell the dog.
Wow.
And just this past weekend, I was at my computer, and I looked, and, I saw another photo of an animal of some sort. I think it was another dog. And just by looking at it, I could smell it. And I thought to myself, I wonder if it works with other things. So I have this iTunes gift card that my sister Ann gave me, and it's about like a foot from my computer. So I looked at it and just sort of, like with this expecting to smell it, not forcing it, but I found I could smell it without touching it to my nose.
Wow.
And then I tried it with the rubber plant, which is about 2 feet away.
So do you think it works on visual along with the smell? Like one triggers the other?
Yes, I have to see it. I have to see it. But then, in what I just described to you, it's very powerful. I mean, if I see something, I could smell it as if I'm holding it right to my nose.
That's interesting because it's kind of different. Like the one I was talking about earlier when I was younger and I could smell and taste metallic before I was going to hurt myself. It sounds like it's a whole different kind of ball of wax.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you've heard of, Verna, have you, in your research on people with different abilities, have you heard of this?
I've heard of it in different ways. I've heard of it when somebody is. I've heard of it when people are actually praying at a shrine in a church, or they're praying, or they're meditating, and they can smell the heavy scent of roses, and there's nothing around them, and I've actually been thinking about somebody I love, or thinking about or I've actually done some prayer and meditating work, and I can smell a heavy flower scent in the air. But there's another way I've heard of it that goes along with the visual. As I've said to a lot of people, I'm a writer, and I write a lot, and I often write, about places and people and things, and I sense, and of course you have to use your imagination. So I've actually been able to actually think and really smell things that I'm being inspired by it, because I'm sensing them so hard that I actually feel as if I'm smelling
It's
them.
as if you put yourself right into that.
I put myself into that atmosphere, so I'm experiencing that sensitive sense of smell and seeing and hearing. And
Right.
sometimes I'll look back into something that I was writing about or thinking about, and then I found out that I was actually on target. So that shows you how vivid the imagination and how vivid your visualization senses and sense of smell can really go.
Right. It's a very powerful scent. And it's interesting you mentioned the roses. There's a certain universality about the smell of roses. When I was in Scotland 2 years ago, we were in this haunted castle, and the woman in green roams through this castle, and she leaves, according to the legend, a scent of roses when she's ever around in the environment. And my sister, myself, and another woman in our group we actually caught the whiff of the roses, that it just dissipated after a few seconds, but it was
Wow.
there. And why roses? Why the flowery scent? You know,
Yeah.
as opposed to you know, this beans. I mean, I don't know.
I could imagine this will just get stronger too. I mean, now that you said you quit smoking 2 years ago, but I'm sure since that time it's just developed further and further, and who knows where it's going to go beyond that.
You know, what I would like to do is like to develop it even more so in going into a location and supposedly haunted by, you know, whoever lived there before or who died there, and just looking at their photographs and getting, you know, and smelling it.
That
You
would
know,
be
like how
that would
they
actually
smell.
be a really good sense
Way
to come out when you're
To
investigating, especially in
corroborate,
an old house.
you know, like EVPs or anything. Like if I could smell that the person that I see in the photo or not. I mean,
Yeah, that'd be
I thought
awesome.
that was
It'd be
just,
great, yeah.
And I looked it up, and that's where I got the term clarifaction, but it doesn't really seem to, I mean, apply to this particular case.
Absolutely.
Where-
Well, I hope
yeah,
when you
'cause
use
I-
this sense, you're on one of the investigations with us, because I'd love to experience you actually using this,
Yeah,
using this
yeah.
extra sensitive quality of yours, gift of yours.
It's almost like, you know, how it works is you can't force it. It's a weird, I've heard it described once by this psychic medium where you empty your mind, but then within yourself you have this expectant feeling, like a sense of expectancy. You're expecting to hear it or smell it or see it, but not really pushing.
Right.
Yeah, it's really hard to describe because I find that if I force it, it wouldn't work. It doesn't work at all. But if I just sort of open myself with this expectant air, like I'm going to smell it or I'm going to see you, then it tends to be more doable. Workable.
I think like with any kind of medium ability, if you force anything, it's not going to come as easy. You have to be relaxed, in tune, and at your own pace, pretty much.
Right, because I find that enforcing things, it's almost as if you want to impose your own senses onto it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And all that. So it.
Very cool.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
Very nice. Very cool.
Right, and like yes, roses for maybe a woman, a female spirit, and then on the other hand, people say they smell sulfur when there's Evo, something that's very negative. And so, where does that come from? Is it from a folklore, or I mean, why?
Yeah, you got to think: is it teleportation? Is it something we can't see that's happening that the smell's from? You know, is it something? Is it movement? Is it energy shifting? And we just don't know. That's the problem.
Right. It's almost like I spoke with someone once whether they can invent a what would you call it, a odometer? Or a smell machine, like to actually gauge the different smells that are possible, or that, you know, you catalog. Just like people, I guess, who make perfumes, they have different notes or different ways of describing each different fragrance or so I'm just wondering once, like whether, because we tend to smell things when we're out there investigating, whether such a contraction could be made to measure
Right.
smells.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I've only ever smelled cigarette smoke, cigar smoke, and sometimes perfume, but for some reason, because I'm so allergic and sensitive to smoke in general, that's the one thing that I always pick up on is a cigar or a cigarette, and I'm immediately looking around for one. And that's happened on a couple of places we've been at where it's like nobody with me smokes, but I instantly can smell that cigarette that's been lit, and I don't know where it's coming from. So it's weird that it's one of my worst allergies is also one of the one thing I pick up on.
I've smelled cigar and pipe smoke before from from being in an old room or being in an old house where the person actually used to smoke cigars and pipes, and that was what they used to do.
Yeah, because I think it's retained in sometimes the fabrics or the wood.
Actually, Sharon, I think you and I once smelled that when we were together and we were investigating something. I think you and I actually once smelled what smelled like cigar smoke, and didn't you say something to me once about that?
Well,
It was a while back, but I think you and I did, actually.
Yeah, that would have been a while back.
Yeah.
But it's very powerful. That's all I could say. The sense of, you know how smells evoke all kinds of memories, and so just something more to look into.
Definitely.
Well, thank you guys very much. It was really it's nice talking with you.
You too. Thank you for calling
thanks
us,
for
and
calling.
you'll call back and be live in our studio once, right? For when we do spirit photography.
Oh, you can do live spirit photography?
Well, just a show on spirit photography, tips, suggestions, things that happen. You are the pro.
No.
Come on,
Don't
Sharon.
be modest.
I don't think I'm a pro at all. It's just common sense when you're like looking at things. That's all.
I learned from you, though. Some of the tips you've given me, I've actually passed on to other people. When
Sharon,
they're
you can give
taking
some great tips. And also, if you and Ann can come on and talk about the equipment that they use in paranormal investigations, that would be great.
Well, okay, we look forward to one day. And so, well, good luck, you guys. It's a great, I think you have a good thing here. And, filling a gap as far as radio shows go in the Bay Area and around the world. They could listen. Anyone could tune in, right?
That's right.
That's
all
right.
over around the world.
Yep,
It's
all
on
around the world.
iTunes. It's all over the place.
Yep.
We're representing San Francisco now.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, well, thanks a lot. And, I will see you soon.
All right, Sharon. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Sharon.
Have a good night.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay. Thanks, Sharon. Leon.
Yeah, that was great.
Interesting variation on mediumship there. And I think we're going to take a music break here. And when we come back, we're going to hopefully have Jackie Clable finally come in. And I'm also going to tell my Sylvia Brown psychic story as well. So you want to stay tuned for that. I'm not one who's 100% sold on psychics and mediums. I'm very skeptical, but I'm open to anything and everything. So I can I'll tell you my story with Sylvia Brown because she's passed now. I think it's okay. But I was even doing my research before I was a ghost hunter. So there you go. And I think our friend Jackie's going to give us a call if she's not already on the phone. Not sure if she is. I don't think so.
No, but we'd like it if Jackie or anybody else, please
Absolutely.
call. Yeah, we'd love to hear you.
Because I'm going to tell you my Sylvia Brown story.
Oh, good.
I'm going to go ahead and start it now until we get a call, and then I'll just finish it after the call's over. So back in I was working at the post office in probably 1997 up in Seattle, Everett, Washington, actually. And I was working graveyard. And it was Halloween time, so we were working a lot of overtime. And there was a radio show. A local radio show was going to do a live Halloween broadcast, Halloween morning, at a local old theater that was being renovated. It used to be a vaudeville theater, then a movie theater, then a stage theater. Actually, all of those things over time. And Sylvia Brown, renowned psychic, was going to do a walkthrough and give her psychic impression about what happened in that building for the last 100+ years. Because I think it was from 1890. So we went, after work, we trotted on down, and I recorded the broadcast just because I was curious what was going to happen. And we followed Sylvia Brown around along with the radio station guy. And she's... Oh, see, our story's interrupted, but we got a call. Here we go. Ecto Portal. This is Tony speaking. Who's on the air?
Hey, Tony. How you doing? This is Jackie.
Hey, Jackie.
Jackie.
Jackie, my partner in crime, investigating.
I know. I'm the bad partner. I'm sorry. I tried to get on earlier, but I was so busy.
Yeah, I know, but that's good, right? For our first show, we actually have calls waiting. That's intense.
That's great.
I love that.
Yeah.
See,
It's actually really intense and really good. I'm happy for you two both.
Yay, thank you. So our topic is mediums and sensitives, and I already know, but I want you to tell the listeners and Verna, what is your opinion of mediums and sensitives? How do you feel personally?
Personally, I actually, mediums and sensitives, it's kind of like 50-50 with me. Like 50% I totally believe, the other 50 kind of want to be, but are really not. Of course, Verna is, I know that. We both know that. But others, I'm not even quite sure. But hey, what can I say? You really never know. For example, I'm clairaudient, okay? I can hear, I'm not a medium. I am not a medium, but I can hear and talk to spirits wherever I go to, which is kind of different too, but hey, what can I say?
It's still a form of mediumship as far as I'm concerned.
Definitely it's a form of mediumship.
It absolutely is, and if you want to get rid of it, forget about that. You cannot do that. But it's fine. It's okay. And remember, when the three of us investigated over at the Fior and the San Remo, I've only listened to like 2 lots of it, but Verna and Tony, I've got good stuff there.
Yeah, absolutely. We get good stuff there all the time. That was, again, that's Fior d'Italia in the San Remo Hotel in North Beach here in San Francisco.
It's a very active place.
Give a shout out to those guys.
It's very active, so I was very happy about that night.
Absolutely. And then, of course, Jackie, me and you went on to Alcatraz the next day, so the fun didn't stop then.
And it did not, and you know what? I didn't think we'd get anything, Tony, because it was so loud. There were so many different people there.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm done. But when we went off by ourselves for that last, like, maybe 1 hour or so, we got good stuff. I mean, I got good stuff there. I'm sure you did, too.
Yeah, I've only listened to a little bit of it. We actually did a live EVP session, hopefully to play it on the air. But I didn't get enough time to put that together. So if I definitely find something, we'll replay that later on.
I bought the stuff. I got stuff. Remember when you were posing for that picture? You were trying to look the same as that guy did on the wall?
Oh, yeah.
I got 4 there. In the shower room, I actually got like 4 there as well.
Wow.
In the dining hall, I got 1. And in the warden's office, I got 3.
Now, Jackie's talking EVPs here, electronic voice
so many
phenomenon.
People there that night, so crazy, and you and I prefer to do it just with the 2 of us when everything's silent and alone.
Yeah.
I didn't think we'd get anything, so I was happy.
Yep. Great. That's awesome.
That's great that you managed to get all of that despite the circumstances. But, I visited that place years ago when I was probably about 10 years old, and the minute I walked in there was just such heavy, depressing energy. I mean, even as a kid, I was walking around and I was so depressed, and I just knew that there was still a lot of unhappy spirits hanging around that place.
There are absolutely a lot of heavy spirits around there, Verna. And I have to tell you, we all slept. There were like maybe 20 volunteers or so. I'm not even quite sure how many. But Tony and I, we each had our
35
cell up
35.
there. But when Tony and I were just almost asleep next to each other in different cells, not quite, we heard this horrendous scream with this guy saying, "Back off." Remember, Tony?
Yeah, that's what he screamed. Back off.
Yeah. And the next thing I look up, and there's this guy kind of running past our doors.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened. Maybe somebody wanted to come and say hello to him. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe they did. Maybe he got a little wake-up call.
I don't know, but it was very, very cool.
Yeah, I've gotten
froze our butt off, but it was very cool.
I've gotten a couple of really good EVPs. There's a lot of swearing in EVPs that we record on Alcatraz. We get a lot of filthy language on Alcatraz.
Seriously, they drop the F-bomb like every second word.
Exactly.
They do. They're quite vulgar, but there are so many people there.
But I guess if
we're going to do that together, all of us, okay?
Yep. But I guess if you're a kidnapper, a bank robber, a murderer, you're going to go to prison for the rest of your life. You're going to probably swear, just as a guess.
Of course. You have to do that.
Of course you will.
Okay, love. I'm going to let you guys go now.
Okay.
But, love,
Yeah.
I'm sure it's going to be a great show tonight.
Absolutely.
Hopefully, I can pick it up later on,
Yeah.
the whole show, because I couldn't get on in the beginning.
Right. We had trouble with the live feed today. That's why you can't listen live. So that's why we said go ahead and
Okay.
call in. That way you'll be on the show.
Sounds good.
All right.
Okay, love you both. All the best. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye, Jackie.
Thanks, Jackie.
That was Jackie Cleve, my investigator twin.
Jackie's great to investigate with.
Lot of fun.
She gets she documents a lot of great evidence, and she's gotten some great photos.
She makes you dance.
She does make you dance. She makes you do what's called the butt dance.
Yes, the butt dance is now legendary, and the famous para-celebrity Janice Overding has done the butt dance. I think Jeff Dwyer has done the butt dance. So there's a lot of para-celebs and authors who've been on the TV shows who have done the butt dance. So Jackie's dance will be legendary as a provoking device.
Yeah, it's
Trigger object, sorry. That's a better
be
term.
prepared to do the butt dance if you do an investigation with Jackie.
Yeah, Verna.
Yes. I know. I didn't do it last time,
promised
but I
to do it.
promised to do it next time.
It's required. It's like an initiation with Jackie. If you go anywhere, Virginia City, Nevada, we investigate all the time because it's a old gold mine, silver mining town. Everybody's got a ghost story. Every bartender there wakes up and sees ghosts. They go to work and they serve spirits. So, and everybody there looks like a ghost. So, yeah. So we get stuff all over the place. Oh, now let me tell you my Sylvia Brown story. Okay.
Yes. Continue with your
All right.
Sylvia Brown story.
So Halloween, worked at the post office in 1997. Sylvia Brown's touring our local theater up in Washington to give her psychic impressions of the theater and what happened there historically. So we're walking around the theater. She's standing on the stage, and she goes, there was a second projection booth. This is a one-screen movie theater, old. She goes, there was a second projection booth on the top, and there used to be an old potbelly stove in that projection booth, and there was an argument, we got another call. Okay, to be continued. You're like, what the heck with the Sylvia Brown story? All right, Ecto Portal. This is Tony speaking. You're on the air. Who is this, please?
Hey, it's your
Hello?
Linda.
Hello? Who's calling?
Hello.
Linda.
Sorry, hello?
Hello.
I
Hi.
recognize that voice.
Who is that, Verna?
I think it's Linda.
Linda?
Yeah, it's Linda.
Oh my God,
Wow,
Linda!
great. I'm so glad you called.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. So this is a very good show, very interesting about Sylvia Brown and stuff.
Yeah. Eventually I'll get to the end of the Sylvia Brown story, but, I might even have to continue next week at this rate, but that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. I have my opinions of Sylvia Brown, which I will tell you after my story is over.
Well, I met Sylvia Brown myself.
When did you meet her?
Yeah, tell your experience.
I met her at in Hayward a long time ago. I think it was back in 1970. Was it 77 or something like that, or 78? And she was doing her little psychic thing in Chabot College in Hayward. And so after she did her thing, I thought she was pretty cool.
Did she give readings at all?
Oh yeah, she did the readings in the audience and everything, and I mean, she seemed like she was pretty genuine and everything, that she knew what she was doing. And so anyhow, so we saw her and everything. I was really fascinated by her and all that. And my friend, our friends and us, we went to, I think it was Denny's or Carol's or one of those restaurants. And there was her with her little entourage, and she came, in, and they sat at a big table right next to our table. So I just came up to her, and I just introduced myself and told her I enjoyed her lecture, and she was a really lovely lady.
Did she actually do any reading for you at all about anything?
No,
Did she do did she do like a cold reading of the audience, kind of walk around and? No.
Actually, she just kind of point the audience. People raise their hands and.
Oh, okay.
And then she did go. Like went offside. Like she other people on the other side of the audience, and she's like, I think there's somebody, your uncle or somebody who's trying to talk to you and stuff like that. So
Wow.
yeah, she did that. So she was pretty cool. I mean, I didn't know she lived in Campbell, California too.
Oh, wow.
And that's where we were living at the time.
That was probably back when she didn't have 5 houses, though, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I think she was on her way to becoming very famous. She was on the Montel show a lot.
I remember that. She was like his resident psychic. And guess where the Montel show was filmed?
Right, Montel really, really liked her a lot.
But guess where Montel Williams' show was filmed?
Where?
In the same old converted construction lumberyard into a studio that Dark Shadows used to shoot in.
I didn't know that.
It's yep. It's on like 51st Street on the west side. It's a small, tiny studio. Wendy Williams shot her show there. It's a little 2-story building. It looks like a garage almost, but she shot in the same studio. So interesting.
Yeah. Wow. Very interesting. That's so cool.
Yeah, me and my friend Lisa tried to break in there not break in, but talk our way in.
No, I'm kidding.
And they wouldn't let us in because it was in between shows. But we tried.
You tried, but you didn't succeed.
That's
Sorry.
right. Awesome. So you are a psychic medium from what I hear as well?
I wouldn't call myself a psychic medium. I call myself more of a sensitive.
A sensitive? Okay.
Yeah, I've been seeing spirits since I was 4 years old, and continue to experience them. And I'm part of your ghost hunting team, right?
Absolutely,
Yep.
absolutely. Of course you are.
Yes, you are, Linda.
Of course.
Until our next Virginia City outing.
And Linda, you've documented some great evidence. You really have.
Yeah, I have.
Yep.
And I think I've seen a total of 7 apparitions in my life, full apparitions in my life. And, I can tell those stories later on,
Well, you'll be here in person, I'm sure,
you'll
many
definitely
times.
be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And everything. So,
You're our Ed McMahon when you come on.
well, all I can say is congratulations on the new radio show. I hope everybody's listening because you guys are, awesome.
Yay, thank you. Can only get better from here, right?
Awesome. Huh?
Can only get better from here, right?
It's going to get better and better, and hopefully people would, call in and give their stories to you and everything. That'd be wonderful.
Yay! Please do that.
Yes, please. We'd love to hear it, and we'd love everybody to bring it out of the shadows, and we're totally open to hearing everything.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for calling, Linda.
Yeah, it's great hearing from you.
It was a pleasure. I just want to congratulate you guys on your new show, your first night, and you have a rest of the evening, fabulous.
You continuing being sensitive into the night.
Yep.
I will.
I'll see you when I get home.
Okay. Good
Bye,
night,
Linda.
Bye.
Guys. Bye-bye, sweeties.
Okay, so now
now
thank
you can
Linda.
continue with your Sylvia Brown story.
Okay, so Sylvia Brown investigating this theater live on a radio show on Halloween Day morning. I worked overtime, 12 hours. We're there. We're kind of curious and excited. She said there was a second projection booth. There's a potbelly stove in it, and that there was an argument between 2 men. She sensed an argument in the past between 2 men. One man basically smashed the other man's head into the potbelly stove, and he died. He bled to death in the projection booth. And she said this other man that did it panicked, and he took the body and he hid it somewhere. She couldn't tell where or how, but that he hid the body somewhere. And then we said, oh, okay, that's interesting. That's different. So we walked, the radio show's sucking every bit of it up and describing it and going on. You know how the radio does. Radio shows always like doing hands, right? Mm-hmm. Nudge, nudge. No. Anyway, so we went around the theater, and she goes, we were up on the balcony at this point. She goes, there's a girl on stage. She's about 12. Oh, she's waving at me. She's in a production, a community theater production of Our Town. She goes, yeah, it's Our Town. They're actually rehearsing it right now, but she waved at us because she saw us in the balcony. And then Sylvia was waving back a little bit. We thought that was interesting. So we kind of walked around the theater again, and she sensed another spirit that watches the shows and enjoys the productions, the movies. The vaudeville used to be there. Judy Garland played there, the Marx Brothers. It's a small little theater, but it still had a lot of vaudeville. And after it was over, she sat on the stage, and people would come up one at a time, and she would kind of give her own personal reading. There's only like 12 of us. And she kind of did mine. I didn't really give her a lot, and she just said, "You're going to find a new career soon, and someone is sick who's close to you who will get better." And those things were true, but also very vague. So the next day, I was curious. I had recorded all her details. I went back to the theater and talked to the one of the projectionists who'd been there since, he said, 1945. He was a projectionist since 45. And she said, there's a whole nother projection booth up here, and there was a murder. He goes, there's never, ever been another projection booth in this theater, ever. Really? He goes, no, never. There's never been. There's only been one. It's on the main floor. I go, okay. And I looked at all the productions that the theater had ever done. Ever. They had a complete list of every show that had ever been done there, professional otherwise, and there wasn't a single Our Town. So I'm getting more and more disenchanted the more I'm actually digging in research. And this wasn't as a ghost hunter. This was just me curious, going to the library to do my research. So that shows you what research and history can actually pull you into. So it the paranormal kind of pulled me into the mediumship with Sylvia Browne, and then also in the history. And so to me it was debunked, sort of. Mm-hmm. And that was the only contact I ever had with her, was this brief exchange personally. But she gave me the vibe that she was sitting up there sort of going through the motions. She didn't really want to be there. It was like a contract thing for her, a PR thing. And she just sort of didn't say much. When someone said something to her, then she would react, not give something to you. So that's my Sylvia Browne story. So I'm a little skeptic. I know John Edwards does cold readings, and he has microphones in his audience recording people having conversations, and interns writing down, "Woman in green sweater says brother is sick. I wonder if he'll talk about him." A man with bald head, red sweater, third row, center, said his daughter just passed of cancer. I wonder if he'll be able to reach her. And then John Edward reviews all these notes before he goes out on stage and does his cold readings. So he has a lot of information there. He has it done. It's been fished for him. So to me, that kind of discredits him a bit. I mean, it's a racket. It is TV, so maybe he can do more than that. But cold reading is not a big thing with me personally.
Most of the readers that I know and the readings that I've done, the less I know about a person, the better. Because when you're in that state where you're actually doing the reading for the person, the pictures and the sights and the sounds will come to you, and it's often something that doesn't make sense to you, but if they come, you have to trust what you're getting, and you have to and oftentimes you'll be saying something, and you'll be very surprised at what comes out of you, and you have to trust it, and it's one of those things where you sort of have to let it flow, and to me, if I know something about the person or I know something ahead of time, it sort of spoils what's coming in, because you don't want, I don't know, I'm not sure how to describe it, but it doesn't. I like the spontaneity of letting spirit come through and talk first, and I think anybody who's done extensive readings will understand that. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like when you're investigating a place, and a lot of people don't want to know any kind of history or any kind of names, situations that may have happened, because they want to go in free form to see what kind of evidence they collect and then collaborate the story. Yeah. It sounds like it's kind of similar with a medium, as far as you don't want to know. It is kind of similar to that. Personally, when I've investigated some places, I like to know some of the history, but I like to be surprised too, and get surprises as well. And I think that that's actually a good thing, because it helps me not to be so biased about what's coming in and what we're documenting. And yeah.
It's funny because it reminds me of, I'm currently finishing a book called The Witch of Lime Street, which is a nonfiction book about Houdini's relationship. Remember, he used to be a big debunker of mediums because he had a secret password or a name that his mother used to call him when he was a little tiny kid. And he told his mother, this is only the name that we know. And anybody who's a psychic will know what that name is. And no one ever came up with that name. He's seen millions of psychics. And this book is about Mrs. Crandon. It's a big case between him and Mrs. Crandon and the Psychical Research Society investigating her as a medium. He said he disproved her, debunked her. Others in Harvard said, well, no, maybe she's valid. So it actually caused a big stir, and he used to perform reenactments of her seances on stage when he toured the world. He'd show how she performed her trickery, and he would actually show the things in his seance that she did. So it's interesting because then there was a thing that they figured maybe she was being hypnotized by her husband to perform these tricks for him to get the notoriety. And that she doesn't have a conscious mind that it happened, that she did it. Maybe she has some abilities. So it's an interesting psychological look at being obviously a magician. He says, trickery is my forte. That is my life. And I can tell you this woman is a fraud. And they had a contest for, I believe, $5,000 to any medium that could prove that they were legit. They had all kinds of entries, and Mrs. Crandon was one of the big ones. And actually, I'm such a geek. I Googled the house, 10 Lime Street in Boston. It's still there. It's a 3-story building. But there you go. Historian in me wants to see, feel, touch, if anything still exists. So, but as far as mediumship,
That would be a great house to visit someday. And
wouldn't it?
yeah, it definitely would.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
But there's all kinds of just mediums and sensitives. Now, what do you think is the difference between the two, mediums and sensitives?
Not much.
Is one more than the other? Is one just more perception than actual ability?
You know, I don't really think there's a very big difference. The one thing I can say about a sensitive is that a sensitive is more like a sponge, and they're more feeling and sensing things and taking it all in. Not that a medium doesn't do that, a medium does, but a medium tends to have a lot of visual and tends to hear the spirit a lot more than just sensing it. But it's a fine line. I mean, sensitive can be all of those things too. But I've had people say to me, "Well, I'm a sensitive," and they're the people who, when they walk in a room, they sense an atmosphere, and it bugs them for days because they're so sensitive and they take things in so easily. Whereas mediums do too, but it just tends to come out differently than.
You got to wonder if Feng Shui is an offshoot of mediumship. If the things don't seem right in a certain way, and you can feel it when you walk in a room, I wonder if that has any kind of variations for mediumship.
I'm sure it does, because I've noticed that when people are remodeling a house, or when they've removed some furniture, or they're knocking a wall down, actually spirit activity tends to increase, or they bring out something that wasn't there before. And sometimes, and as everybody knows who's ever decorated their house or who's ever cleaned it up, when you shift something, you open up something, and a lot of the times you're opening up to something good. But I've also seen spirit activity as a result of remodeling too.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it does stir up a lot of activity.
It definitely does, yeah.
I actually tried to have places where I wanted to investigate before remodeling and then after remodeling, just to see, how much of a difference there would be as far as activity goes.
Yeah. And I think it has a lot to do with the history and where the building was before, and also possibly because when the person moved in, they might have brought something with them when they moved in, and now that they're remodeling, the energy's shifting, and whatever they brought in isn't sure what to do with that energy that's shifting.
Right.
That's my take on it.
Okay, we got about a minute here to wrap up our first show. Thank you for all that called in tonight with some of your views and opinions and stories. They were definitely interesting.
Yes, thank you. It was great hearing from all of you, and we hope to get some more calls from some more people. And go to our website and go to the Facebook page, and we'd love to hear your comments.
Absolutely, and definitely come back to fccfreeradio.com, and you can check out the live feed next week when we do our show, and check out the Facebook page for FCC Free Radio, as well as Ecto Portal.
And there's a Twitter page as well.
Yep. All right, and I guess we will talk to you next time.
Good night.
Good night.